Well, okay, recording is in progress. All right, good morning, Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. And here we are again. Um, we are going to meditate for 20 minutes. Then I'm going to talk until I run out of things to say. And then you guys are going to do the rest of the work. Nice to see everyone. After 3 years of this stuff, I'm impressed that people still are willing to show up. So um, that's some kind of a statement. We won't try to over-interpret it. I'm sort of delaying just a little bit because a couple people are still showing up in the waiting room. So for those of us who are letting people in from the waiting room, it's nice to be able to not have to worry about that during the meditation. However, it looks like it's may have stopped for now, so let's start our sitting. I presume you've all come prepared and to meditate, whatever that might mean. But particularly, I think it means that you have your body situated in a way that you can either sit or lie down and be still. So just settling into your posture. Just this initial part of meditation practice is important and can be revealing to just see how were you holding your body before you decided to meditate, and then adjusting to what feels like a helpful way to sit for meditation. So I often find that I tend to tilt forward, that I'm slumping in some way. So when I decide to meditate, I make my body more upright. But in doing that, I and you don't want to come into some rigid posture either. So we're immediately confronted with the question of right effort, which is kind of the underlying question of meditation most of the time. And not to get too wrapped up, that is to understand that whatever posture you assume is going to be imperfect in some way. The only ideal postures are those that are held by statues. The rest of us have to just manage as best we can. And just bringing awareness into the feelings of the body, being aware of the sensations that are present. Might be some obvious sensations. Maybe let your mind move around your body to notice anything that stands out. And then you can explore a little bit the more subtle sensations. as we begin to meditate and begin to turn inward in this way, a lot of ordinarily unnoticed experiences of body and mind can come to the forefront. And having a sense of just releasing through the body, of letting go of any tension. And as we tune in, seeing that there is also a subtle level of release that is sometimes possible for us if we have enough focus, clarity, right in that release. There's a sense of calming. And with this entire process of body awareness, settling to bring in the breath, just feeling the body breathing. The initial instructions the Buddha gives around mindful breathing, to simply notice the length of the breath. He suggests that we see if a breath is long or short. That seems to be perhaps a kind of shorthand for just being aware of the breath on any level. At least that's how it's been taken. So typically we try to pay attention to the sensations of the breath, not the length of the breath. What does it feel like to breathe? Each breath really has its own life. Even though on the superficial level, it can seem as if breathing is really not very interesting, not much is happening. When we apply mindfulness, something changes. For one, we start to notice the nuances of sensation. But more significantly, we also see that applying mindfulness to the breath has a calming effect on the body to start with. Sustaining that awareness then expands the calming to the mind as well. As with any aspect of meditation, there is no guarantee that there will be certain results if we are mindful. Sometimes we wind up lost in thoughts or struggling with restlessness, caught up in some emotion or frustration that our mindful breath can't seem to cut through. It takes patience, persistence, to just keep working with whatever arises in the body, the mind. There are these ideals, these potentials, but our experience in any given period of meditation may not manifest in those ways, in those pleasant, insightful ways. Patience, patience is what we bring to the challenges of meditation. Try to accept or allow whatever is arising without struggling, without rebelling. Here we see the limits of our capacity to control our experience. In 12th step language, we could say we're powerless over our mind and body. Not that we have no influence over them, but that there are ways in which they can override any of our efforts to control. No patience and acceptance, the things that tend to diffuse those challenges of body and mind. Not entering into conflict with reality, with our experience. Well, I might have rambled a bit there. I do find that these days I tend to turn my guided meditations into a kind of contemplative mindfulness or Dharma talk. Um, so we were talking about making the theme today the conditionality of happiness. I think it's just understanding that we do that we depend on conditions for happiness, and noticing when that's happening. That in itself is a helpful insight to not be swept away by it, and that coming out of the idea, of being uh, so emotional about a sports event or a sports team, is a great example of it because it's such a kind of uh, absurd thing to be invested in, um, in the sense that it has no worldly significance. And of course, there's the old Seinfeld thing about what is it that you're rooting for, right? Like you're rooting for a uniform or something because the players keep changing. Now we have this, teams move. Our local, one of our local baseball teams has decided to cash in. Um, so, so yeah, to, what's the opposite of uh, the conditionality of happiness? The thing that comes to mind is equanimity. The mind state in which we're not disturbed by the pleasant or the unpleasant or even the neutral. Um, and this is a highly valued state, um, in Buddhist teachings. Equanimity shows up in some of the classic lists. It's the seventh of the seven factors of enlightenment. That gives it a really vital kind of position to suggest that as we develop these different qualities of mindfulness, and energy, and investigation, uh, concentration, and tranquility, and joy, that they all culminate in equanimity, not in some ecstatic state, but rather in this balanced state. And that, and that very much speaks uh, to Buddhism. Uh, that that ecstasy is something that's transient and conditional, but the quality of equanimity, um, for until you presumably attain some level of enlightenment, that too is going to be conditional. But it gives us well, I'll say a goal, but not so much a goal to get to, but rather a kind of uh, way of orienting our thinking. So equanimity uh, operates on multiple levels. There is just an emotional equanimity, which is certainly precious, when we can be in a state that we're not easily disturbed by anything. But then there is also the equanimity of insight, which has to do with our understanding, or a way of seeing and interpreting our experience. And I was just thinking about this before we started the class today, and I guess it came up for me in the last 24 hours that there's a little piece in my book, Living Kindness, where I talk about these two effects of mindfulness. One is that it affects the way we feel, and so the way we experience the world. When something happens, our mind state and the state of our nervous system as it's uh, particularly as mindfulness affects those things, um, that it if we are mindful, we respond to stimuli in a very different way than we do if we are not mindful, because mindfulness is doing something to the nervous system itself. And this again is pointing to the equanimity, the balanced, the nervous system equanimity, let's say. And then this other way that mindfulness operates and that equanimity operates is that it changes how we see the world. And this is why it's called insight, right? Obviously, sight is the operating metaphor here for our way of interacting with these experiences. And so when we have equanimity of insight, then when our sports team loses, we understand that this is a experience. We see it through this lens of, oh, that's the nature of sports. That's the nature of attachment, as someone brought up before. Uh, and it is conditional, and uh, it can't be held on to. And so perhaps we're not as wrapped up in it. Um, because we know there are people who respond to sporting events by like setting fire to cars, for instance, just one example, which seems a bit over the top. It's very different from like being a little sad because your team lost. Like, okay, I think you're overly identified. One of the, I don't know, I'm using sports as this analogy. I mean, those of you who've been with me for a while know that I am uh, very engaged in sports. Uh, one of the things that's really striking when you're really devoted, and when you realize that the impermanence, excuse me, the impermanence of success. When the season ends and you're the champion, realizing, oh no, in 3 months it starts all over again, and we start from zero, and it's like, oh no, wait. And you realize that it's completely a trap, right? It's like it's designed to be that way, which is, it's kind of the nature of economics, but even economics on a broader level, the way that humans we set things up in the world, that basically it's never enough, and it's like this is dukkha, right? That you can that you get the thing that you wanted, and then it's gone. And this is where, again, the equanimity of insight is so important, because we can't help but have emotional reactions to gain and loss, the worldly winds, praise and blame, success and failure, pain and pleasure. It's natural to react to those things. I, I'm, I'm I don't care for the kind of spiritual teaching that suggests that we should be unaffected by everything. You know, that that doesn't really sound very inviting, that I don't feel anything, that I don't care about things, you know, even if it's sports or, but, your job or your kids or, the weather or, just going through the world. Oh, nothing, nothing affects me. That sounds a little bit like, heroin to me, basically, you know. So, and okay, maybe there is such a state. Maybe there is such uh, an enlightenment that one is unaffected. But that's not what I see really in spiritual teachers that I think are like really advanced teachers. Even the Buddha, I describe this scene. I think of some of these events as scenes from the suttas, and I think it's in the uh, Mahaparinibbana Sutta, that is the sutta on the Buddha, that's about the last days of the Buddha. And at that point, his senior disciples, Mahamoggallana and I think Sariputta, have died. And he says, it feels as if the Sangha, this community, is empty now that they're gone. That line really jumps out at me. Now, in the nature of the Buddhist suttas, they try to kind of back out on that one by having the Buddha say, because again, I take certain things to be more credible than others in the sutras. They have him say, well, it doesn't bother me. I'm not disturbed by that. I just notice that it's empty, and I'm like, I believe the first part. I don't fully believe the second part. I believe that the Buddha had emotions, like that's like ridiculous to even, do I have to say that? But we often portray him as this person who didn't have emotions, who was beyond an emotional life. And this is talking about this with my wife yesterday, how there's certain sutras, and this is in the Digha Nikaya, which is the longer discourses. The longer discourses apparently were put together as uh, had more of a marketing angle to them. They were the suttas that were uh, presented to uh, people who were not Buddhists, who, when they're trying to sort of proselytize Buddhism. And so the different collections, this is a little bit in the weeds, but I know there's a few of you who are interested in this. The different collections had different audiences in mind. So the Digha Nikaya is where the Buddha is described as a god in godly terms, kind of as a god, like there and mythical terms, right? And but there are many other sutta collections where he doesn't come off like that at all, where he's just like an ordinary human, an ordinary enlightened human being. But so that sutta where he says this, that the sangha feels empty, but like doesn't disturb me at all. Um, that's in the Digha Nikaya. So that's again why I'm a little skeptical that he was on that he didn't have feelings about loss. So that aside, we don't know what the Buddha felt, or but just what does it do to us? Let's say, put this in other terms. What does it do to your own mind? Because I was thinking about talking about comparing mind today. So this sort of is in that theme. What does it do to your mind, your heart and mind, your felt experience, your mental experience, if you think oh, enlightened people, nothing bothers them. Nothing upsets them at all. They're just completely emotionally protected, unaffected. Well, what does that do to you? What that does to me is I immediately go, oh God, I'm not enlightened enough. Oh, they're so enlightened and I could never be that. And but look at it, it also does this thing of it's feeding into an idea of superiority and inferiority, spiritual superiority, and immediately sort of setting up this comparing mind and an ideal that really doesn't make sense. What, how do, you know, emotions are just part of our nervous system. They're not like things that you could just go, oh, cut that out. Now, insight, of course, changes how we respond to those emotions. And that's what I think we're talking about. That we see, oh, there's this feeling, but I don't have to run with it. I don't have to go out and set cars on fire. You know, I can I can have this feeling. I can breathe with it. I can be present for it. I can understand where it comes from. I can understand its conditionality. I can understand that because I care about my child and my child scraped her knee, I feel upset, and that's how I should feel because I'm a human being. You know, this idea that somehow spiritual enlightenment should make me not be a human being. I mean, I think that's what those kind of fantasies are about, is that we get to, when you really are faced with what it means to be a human being, there's a desire to not be it, you know, to not have to deal with it. It's, and, okay, I haven't been talking about addiction, but here we go, right? This is like, I want to be high all the time, you know, it's like, I want to be a god, right? I want to live in a different realm, a different reality. I had a friend who took acid for like 25 straight days. It's like, dude, really? Oh God. I mean, that's what it is. It's like I just want to live in a different reality. And when we look at what the Four Noble Truths, which is what this class I've been doing for the Barry Center is about, the second noble truth, the cause of suffering, it's always really interesting. You see, the Buddha says, sensual desire. Okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense. Sensual desire can't be satisfied. We understand that causes suffering. The craving to be. Okay, so it's sort of like ego and self and inflation and to be somebody and all that. Okay, I can see that. Then there's the desire to not be, or the desire for annihilation. And this is almost what we're getting at here, which is kind of perverse when you think about it. It's like, oh, spiritual enlightenment, total equanimity is to not feel anything. That's why I said it's kind of like heroin. It's like, no, you're talking about annihilation. You're not talking about the fullness of life and awakening. Enlightenment, if we call it awakening, if the word Buddha means awake, well, if you're awake, you got to be feeling shit. Excuse me. I was just side sidebar here. I was on a podcast with this Australian guy who was very funny. I just put it on Facebook yesterday, and they told me it was up yesterday, so I went and looked at it, and the name of the uh, episode is "The Swearing Buddhist." I was like, wait, yeah, he's the one who he like got me. He was like, oh yeah, you can swear. So I was like, ah, yeah, fuck this. And shit. And he's like, and he calls me the swearing Buddhist. I'm like, dude, you're the one who got. Anyway, that's what I apparently am. I've been called a lot of things, but Maybe that's the title for my next book, right? I don't know. Where did I go? So, I think this is, um, this topic was the conditionality of happiness, just to remind myself what I was talking about. And, and that, eh, again, that enlightenment or insight doesn't mean that we transcend conditionality or that we transcend that happiness. Now, that being said, as someone who's supposed to know something about Buddhism, nibbana, which is the Pali for nirvana, is said to be the unconditioned. So there is something to be said about that. Um, but I don't know anything about that. I mean, first of all, except, what I've read and what I can, you know, kind of infer. But when it is talked about, when this unconditioned is talked about in the text, it's not that one gets to a place where you are unconditioned, because that's not possible. You know, no matter what, no matter what enlightenment you have, no matter what contact you have with nibbana, you still have a mind and body that are conditioned and that have to play out causes and conditions and karma and live and die, right? Rather, what it's suggested that when the mind is prepared, is ripe, and the factors of enlightenment are, ripened, that one touches this or has an experience of the unconditioned, or we could say, sees the unconditioned for a moment, and that seeing changes how you see reality. But it doesn't change reality. Okay. This is a significant point. One still has to deal with the things that arise, the feelings and thoughts that arise in the body, and the pain in the body and all that. It's just that one has a distinct clarity about how to understand what we're experiencing, and that changes how we understand our reality. And that just points to the fact that how we understand reality, how we understand ourselves and the world, is all conditioned as well. That is, we are seeing the world through a certain lens. We are understanding the world through a certain lens. You know, just for example, if you are an active addict, you see, let's say you're an alcoholic, you see the role of alcohol in your life as a particular thing, and it has a role, and you think of it in a certain way, like it's a good thing and I need more of it, right? You get sober, and that same thing, alcohol has not changed. The world out there has not changed. That reality hasn't changed, but your understanding of it is completely different now. Now it's you withdraw as from a hot flame, or whatever the term is from the big book. Now you don't want it, you want to stay away from it. Your relationship to it has completely changed. It's the same thing. So the whole world is like this. We have relationships with everything around us, and that relationship is about what we believe those things are, what their functions are, how we want to interact with them, with people, people, places, and things. liking and disliking come in here, very important. Wanting and not wanting, very important. All of this is our relationship to the world that's dependent upon how we see those things, how we understand them. And when you see on the deepest level that everything is impermanent, that there is no self, and that any form of grasping will lead to suffering. When you understand that on the deepest level, which I don't understand it on the deepest level. I'm just talking about what I understand from studying this shit and from tasting it. We've all tasted it a little bit. That then you respond to all that very differently. Stuff still happens. Everything still goes on, but your relationship to it has completely changed now. Just like the way your relationship to alcohol changes when you get sober and let that go. So this is, really, and so that coming back to this question, the conditionality of our happiness, we see that the conditionality of our happiness is by making our happiness dependent upon conditions. That's how we create suffering. And the idea of seeing, that there is some other reality, this unconditioned, and seeing all the things that are unsatisfactory about the conditioned, then is that we don't get caught in those conditions in the same way. We don't respond to them in the same way. And so, again, there's this sort of ideal that I'm talking about, but I think it's more helpful for each of us to realize that we've all had some insight around this. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have some understanding of, letting go is better than clinging. Not better, but more useful than clinging. That loving kindness is a more helpful response to the world than rage. That and all the insights that come through recovery, whether it's about powerlessness or turning it over, all of that, we're all here because we have some taste of this wisdom, and that's really important. Not there's we have this sort of ideal, and maybe there is some kind of attainment, but it's not outside of our understanding what that means. It's a I mean, in certain terms, maybe it's a fulfillment or a perfecting of that wisdom, of that insight. That maybe that's possible, but it's not a completely different way of understanding reality from what we have. So there you go. Turned out to be enough words to fill up the morning. A little exhausting, though, I have to say. Thanks, you guys. We have a few minutes.
Hi, Kevin.
Chime in. Yeah. Who's that?
Hey,
Bob.
it's Bob.
Hello.
Bob from Tasuki.
Tasuki. Wow. Okay.
New Mexico. Mexico.
I was just trying to say it because I didn't know how it was said. Tasuki.
It's a tongue twister, no doubt.
Cool.
I just wanted to comment that I think you're onto something with a swearing Buddhist.
Oh, thanks.
And then I have to look at my reaction to that, because I was invested in sports a lot of years in my life, and it so rang true what you were saying about the conditionality of happiness. I did that with my latest album. I had great expectations for this album because I had awesome musicians on it. I had a producer who everybody knows, and it just hasn't turned out that way. So my happiness, I have to really look at that, because I could, my whole alcoholic life is littered with depression.
Yeah.
And from that, from these kind of things. But it's just a letdown. How do I respond? And, what I really need to work on, I mean, I work at the steps. I want to stop this negative reaction to life, in certain areas of my life.
Yeah.
And, I said, oh, I'll just keep doing the steps. I'll do the steps every year, and it'll happen. And it just, there was always something lacking. I don't know, but this, and when I met you in 2004, I was kind of on the same path and only 3 years sober. And now I'm 20, going on 22 years sober, and I've come back to your teachings. So I'm, I really enjoyed this today. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It really speaks to me of the work that I have to do, but at the same time, I should say the life that I want to have instead of work. But yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. I'm sorry that your album hasn't done what you hoped it would. And, as someone who has experienced a lot of failure around the arts, both music and writing, I can sympathize and empathize. And what has become, what is my go-to in that is the refuges. Reminding myself what's truly important to me, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. And, there's a beautiful chant that the monks do that says, there's a cycle of phrases they do, and then at the end of it, they say, the Buddha is my only refuge. And then they say, and the Dharma is my only refuge, and the Sangha is my only refuge. So they go through this cycle of chanting that arrives on those three things. And of course, there's an illogic in that, because wait, you said that was your only refuge, but there's three of them. But that's that aside, that's what I have to remember. Like, sobriety is my refuge. Right? Showing up is my refuge. Being honest is my refuge. That any success or failure, it's really important to me, as well, that, and any success I have, I take great joy in that. And I can't let that be the defining, what defines my life, and what defines even what defines success, and certainly not what I can't, like, depend on that for my happiness. That's exactly it. It's like, if I depend on a sports team for my happiness, it's just, which doesn't mean, again, like, that doesn't mean I can't get excited or feel sad, but in terms of, the bigger picture, right? And especially when it's like something you invest so much energy and love into of your own work, it's like, that being able to, like, oh, can I step like an inch away from this and just remember that, I am not my album. I am not my book. I am not my painting. These are just things that I do. And for me too, to remember, like, I love to make music and I love to write. And even if it doesn't get received by the world, I'm getting to do this thing that I love to do. So, again, it's about the conditionality, right? It's like, oh, is it not worth doing because people didn't buy it? Well, that's the end of the process. All the other parts of the process are precious and delightful as well. So, yeah, I wish you well with that.
Thank you, Gavin. Appreciate that.
Yeah. John, hi.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for the discussion of happiness and sports. It's such a great one. But I do have a question for you. It's so for a lay person, kind of newly introducing himself to Buddhism, is there a book that you would recommend? I'm sure there's a ton of them, but is there one over others that you would say, well, okay, this is a good starting point for somebody wanting to learn more? I mean, I've learned a ton just listening to you, but I'd like maybe a little more in-depth work.
So learning just about Buddhism per se, or?
Well, maybe a little closer to Buddha's words and his teachings, maybe something more along those lines than, just the structure of Buddhism. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what I want or need.
Yeah. Well, people are putting some things into the chat. I will say What the Buddha Taught by Walpola. So I'll say that the books kind of fall into two categories. There's the books that are kind of written for Western readers that make Buddhism more accessible. And then there are the books that are more have more of an academic side and are drier, so that they don't sort of use like the typical Jack Kornfield or Tara Brach book will have a lot of stories about people who went through experiences that are related to sort of Buddhist principles or something, and they'll so use those stories as teaching stories. But if you take somebody like Vico Analio, who's a Buddhist monk, he will break down the 4 foundations of mindfulness in a way that is profound. But if you haven't been on a bunch of meditation retreats, you probably won't understand what he's saying. So I really like Joseph Goldstein's writing. I think I guess if I'm going to recommend a book now that I've talked around long enough to think about it, Joseph Goldstein's book, Mindfulness, is a really, really good, because it's pretty comprehensive. And it's definitely Dharma based, but it's very readable in a way that the Analio stuff isn't. Yeah, I think that's probably recommended. I often recommend Jack Kornfield's A Path with Heart, which isn't so much a Buddhist book, but it's really about the spiritual journey, and it resonates a lot, I think, for people in recovery, because it really addresses suffering and the complexities of spiritual growth and all that.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. So I know Debbie had her hand up before, but you changed your mind.
Well, I will pitch in. Thanks, Kevin, since you're still on, because I just want to offer so much gratitude to you for bringing this, whole realm of happiness up and joy. It's been so in my heart and my mind recently, a lot because it's spring. We're in that time of year, and life is all about cycles of arising and being and passing. And so I feel, the factor of energy, of awakening, the qualities of effort in life, and sensing into what's present. And also I've been through a lot of loss. March was just packed with loss for me. 3 human deaths, my dog's death, the 4-year anniversary of my father's death. There's a lot there. And so then comes April, and then there's this, so where's the joy? Where's the happiness? What is unconditioned happiness and joy? And because of this practice, because I've having gone through the steps of recovery, learned how to be honest and vulnerable, and to go into inquiry, and then through mindfulness practices, I get to do that pause, and I've gotten to recognize that I can establish my foundation as being, source of love or kindness. And so where is the unconditioned happiness when I'm feeling great sadness or with someone who's suffering? And I've started to ask myself the question, well, what is under this? What's under it when things are difficult? And my joy comes from me being able to say, I'm here. I'm present for this. And then I can ask, what's calling for attention in this time? What needs to be held? What needs to be cared for? And then just having that sense of bigger joy that I've learned through these practices, through your teachings, through books, through experience, that I have that pause in my life to be able to step back for a second, find that balance, as you were talking about, that equanimity. And, so when the sports team loses, not that I'm really engaged with that so much, but I was just listening to a podcast by George Mumford recently. When the sports team loses, can I anchor in mudita for the other team? When there's gain, there's going to be loss for someone else. When there's loss, there's going to be gain for another. We're going to always be floating in these spectrums. And so what mindfulness, what meditation opens up to me is that recognizing the choices I have and what do I want to cultivate in my life. So even in the sadness, yes, to cry, to let it be there, but not be crippled or hooked or feel helpless about anything. I just wanted to share this because it's so powerful. I've been just seeing so many things coming in about happiness and joy right now. And I feel like I want to ride the wave because it's not going to be here, at some other point in time. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for sharing and for giving me the opportunity just to put this out here.
Yeah. Thanks, Deb.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all for showing up today. I don't know why. It's fun. It's interesting. I noticed that, just that. What does that mean? If I'm thanking you for being here, as if you came here to make me happy. And of course, as it turns out, like it does, I feel better when people come. The occasions when I've showed up to teach, and well, there was an event I was supposed to do a book talk in Minneapolis several years ago, and no one came. But I will say that I was really grateful because I didn't want to do it, so that was good. But I did one time. It's over, like early in my teaching out, there was a group in Marin that was very small, and one time I showed up and there was just one person. But I had a great time. We just sat and talked, and so fortunately, but if it was my book, I'd be upset. If only one person bought my book, then I'd be able to buy private lessons. There you go. So anyway,
it's always the little things, Kevin. It's always
yes,
the little things.
The little things, yes. So this Friday will be April 28th, which is the day before my daughter's birthday. She's going to be 25 on Saturday. So we'll have a special Friday night event. I'll be serving cake to everybody here on the. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I forgot. We're on Zoom. We can't. Okay.
Can't go.
It's okay. Yesterday was my wife's birthday. We had no cake.
Yeah, right. Well, that's and that's kind of like, it's like the Buddhist joke where the Dalai Lama gets the empty box for his birthday. Oh, nothing, just what I wanted. Emptiness. All right, folks. Have a great day. I'll be back on Friday night, right? Yeah. Okay.
We feel better too when you show up.
Oh yeah, good.
It makes our day. I'll see you tomorrow, and then we got the day long coming up on Saturday.
Oh God. Yeah. It starts at 7 in the morning, Steve.
I'm up
Terrible.
at 4. What can I say? I do meditations from 5 to 6 every day.
Yeah, well, I
Who
wish I
picked
could,
these hours?
I wish I could be like you.
Blessings. Have a beautiful day. Thank you,
All
Kevin.
right. Take care, Steve.
Yeah.
Everybody. Bye.
Kevin, bye.
Thank you.